They say silence keeps the peace. But sometimes, silence hides the crime. My name is Denise Carter, senior accountant at a tech company called Neuralon Systems. We build AI software for governments and hospitals, and plaster words like integrity, transparency, and trust across every glass wall in the building. And for a long time, I believed them. Until the numbers started whispering. Bullseye, CTA 1 within first 10 seconds. If you've ever been punished for telling the truth, stay. Because what happened to me might sound a little too familiar. I was the one who always stayed late, not because I had to, but because I liked the quiet after everyone left. When the lights dimmed and keyboards went silent, the system felt honest. Numbers told their stories clearly, if you listened close enough. That Friday night, the office was empty except for the soft hum of the HVAC and the flicker of monitors on standby. I was closing the month-end reports when I noticed it, a small line that didn't belong. A duplicate invoice. $47.820. Same project code. Same supplier ID. Same date. But two different routes. One payment went where it should, to our official vendor. The other? To a consulting firm I'd never seen before, AI Future Holdings. At first, I thought it was a typo. A duplicate file. But when I traced the transaction ID, it led to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. That's when I felt it, that tight pull in my stomach. The kind you get when you realize something is very, very wrong, but you're the only one who's seen it. Still, I told myself not to panic. Maybe it was an acquisition. Maybe a new partner we hadn't announced yet. So I checked the vendor database, nothing. Then I searched the internal directory, nothing. Finally, I searched LinkedIn. And there it was. AI Future Holdings appeared under the previous affiliations of our brand new CFO, Richard Lane. Richard had joined just 3 months earlier, Harvard MBA. Ex-Goldman Sachs, the kind of man who could charm a boardroom with a half smile and a tailored suit. Everyone called him the golden hire. But I never trusted golden things. They shine too bright to see what's underneath. He once told me, numbers can be bent if the story is good enough. At the time, I laughed. Now, I wasn't laughing. I went back to the transaction logs. The offshore payments started right after Richard's arrival. Every one of them small enough to avoid notice. But together, they added up to millions. And the worst part? Each one had my digital signature attached. That's when I knew, I wasn't just discovering a fraud. I was being framed for it. The next morning, I'd make a choice that would cost me everything. But that night, staring at those glowing numbers, I whispered to myself, "All right, Richard, let's see how far you're willing to go." The next morning, the office felt different. Not louder, not busier, just watched. I could feel it in the way people moved, too careful. Too measured, like someone had whispered something overnight and now everyone knew. But no one dared to say it aloud. When I walked into the finance floor, Richard Lane was already there. His suit looked like it had never wrinkled in its life. Coffee steaming in his hand. Smile sharp enough to slice glass. "Morning, Denise," he said. His tone was casual, too casual. He never said good morning to me. He stood next to my desk, leaned just enough to lower his voice. "Quick thing," he said, "I'll need the audit files for the Q2 review. Oh, and let's be careful about the vendor reports this time. Don't want any duplicates again." That word, duplicates, hit like a dart. He knew. I stared at him, my pulse steady, pretending to type as if I hadn't heard the threat buried in that smile. He tapped the desk twice and walked away, leaving a faint scent of cologne and something else, victory. By noon, an internal memo went out. External audit scheduled, immediate cooperation required. That never happened without a board vote. Never. And yet, every head turned toward me when the message hit their inboxes. Like I was the reason. Like I had something to hide. It didn't take long to confirm it. My name was already on the list for pre-review interviews. The kind they use when they think someone's cooking the books. I spent the rest of the day pretending to work, fingers trembling on the keyboard. My screen looked blurry from the tears I refused to let fall. That night, I didn't stay late. I went home, locked the door, poured a drink I didn't need, and opened my laptop. If Richard was setting me up, I needed proof. And proof always lived in the metadata. Neuralon's finance system had a shadow layer, a secure internal ledger meant for regulatory compliance. Most employees didn't even know it existed. But I did. I helped build it. Every time a transaction was approved, the system left behind a digital footprint, timestamps, device IDs, location pings. And if someone forged my signature, I'd see it there. So I logged in through the back channel, bypassing the VPN Richard's team installed. The screen filled with lines of code, each one glowing in that pale, sterile blue only late-night monitors make. And then I saw it, a pattern. Every payment to AI Future Holdings had been authorized at 3:12 a.m. from a remote access point outside Atlanta. I was asleep. The location matched a private IP used by the CFO's home office. I took screenshots, encrypted them, and stored backups in 3 different cloud drives under aliases only I could decode. It wasn't enough to survive, I needed to win. By Monday, the audit team had arrived, suits, clipboards, polite smiles that never reached their eyes. They took my badge, restricted my access, and escorted me to a glass-walled conference room. 2 hours. That's how long they questioned me. Where were you on March 14th? Who else had access? Why did the payments route through your approval? Each question heavier than the last. Richard sat in the corner the whole time, saying nothing, just watching. His expression calm, almost entertained. When it was over, he stood, smoothed his jacket, and whispered, "Don't worry, Denise, if you didn't do anything wrong, the truth will protect you." He left before I could respond. The truth. The truth was bleeding out quietly, under layers of signatures and lies. And the system that was supposed to protect it was now hunting me. That night, I drove back to the office after midnight. Security barely looked up when I flashed my old badge. The building was empty again, my kind of silence. I went straight to Richard's office. It was locked, of course. But corporate locks aren't built for accountants who know how systems breathe. 5 minutes later, I was in. The room smelled like power and money, glass desk, hidden bar, 2 screens still glowing faintly. On one monitor, an email draft to the board. Subject line: Disciplinary action. Denise Carter, fraud investigation findings. He hadn't even finished framing me yet. The second monitor was worse. A live feed, security cameras. One focused directly on my desk. He'd been recording me. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that frozen image of myself working late, trusting, tired, oblivious. But something shifted in me then. Fear melted into something colder. Precision. If he wanted a story, I'd give him one he couldn't control. I started downloading the security logs, the emails, the payment chains, everything. Each click was a heartbeat. Each folder, a confession. By the time the sun cracked the horizon, I had enough data to bury him, and half the board that signed off his rise. But evidence isn't power until it's seen. And Richard controlled the narrative. So I needed someone outside the system, someone who couldn't be bought. That's when I remembered Ellen Park, a journalist I'd met years ago during a nonprofit audit. She'd exposed a senator's slush fund and vanished under corporate pressure. She owed me a favor. I called her burner number. It rang twice before she answered. "Carter," she said. "It's been a while." "It's about Neuralon," I said. A pause. Then, "How bad?" "Bad enough that I'm the next name they'll erase." She didn't ask for proof. She knew me better than that. "Send what you have. I'll cross-verify. You've got 48 hours before they move publicly." 48 hours. That was all I had to turn whispers into headlines. The next day, the HR director summoned me for an urgent review. Her tone was soft, too practiced. Behind her, Richard stood with 2 security guards. "Denise," he said smoothly, "we're placing you on temporary leave pending investigation." I laughed, softly, bitterly. "So it's official now." He tilted his head. "We all make mistakes. This doesn't have to define you." I looked him dead in the eye. "Funny thing about mistakes, Richard, they leave fingerprints." And for the first time, he blinked. "They took my badge. Escorted me out." And as I stepped into the cold morning light, I felt the weight of every whisper behind me. But I wasn't broken. Because in my bag, hidden inside an old thermos, was the flash drive. Everything he thought he'd erased. By that evening, the first leak went live. A headline on a small independent blog. Neuralon CFO linked to offshore shell accounts. Insider claims fabricated audit trail. No names yet, no confirmation. But it was enough to start the fire. My phone buzzed. A message from Ellen. "Stay offline. They'll come for you first." I turned off the lights. Sat by the window. And watched the city flicker like a boardroom full of lies. Tomorrow, the truth would be louder. And for the first time in months. I smiled. The story broke faster than anyone expected. By sunrise, Neuralon's name was everywhere, trending on Twitter. Flashing across business news tickers. Whispered in coffee lines. Offshore shell accounts. Fraud. Internal leak. They didn't mention Richard Lane yet. But every insider knew. Every employee who'd ever sat through one of his smug, ethics, presentations knew exactly who it pointed to. And I knew what was coming next. I was the leak. At least, that's what they'd call me. That morning, I didn't hide. I walked straight into the office. Head high, no badge. Just a stack of printouts and the calm that comes when you have nothing left to lose. People froze when they saw me. Some looked away. Some whispered. But one assistant, a kid barely out of college, gave me the smallest nod, like he knew. Like he believed me. The board had called an emergency meeting. Mandatory attendance for all senior finance staff. Of course, I wasn't invited. So I invited myself. When I reached the 32nd floor, 2 guards tried to stop me. "Ma'am, you're not cleared." "I know," I said, "but they're about to discuss my name. I deserve a seat." And maybe it was the way I said it, calm, certain, already past fear, but they didn't move again. I walked in mid-sentence. Richard stood at the head of the long glass table. Sleeves rolled up, face perfectly arranged in concern. "We need to locate the source of this leak immediately," he was saying. "Whoever did this has compromised." He stopped. His eyes found me. For a moment, that mask slipped. The room went still. Every gaze turned toward me. Confusion and tension thick enough to choke on. "Denise," he said softly, "you're not supposed to be here." "Neither," I replied, "are most of the accounts you've been hiding." The silence that followed wasn't ordinary silence. It was the kind that rewrites careers. I placed the stack of documents on the table. Audit trails. Email timestamps. Security footage stills. The truth, printed in black and white. Every single offshore transaction routes through your home system. I said, the same system you told the board was used for data backup. You built an entire shadow ledger to funnel project funds through shell companies linked to your consulting firm. He tried to smile. "You're mistaken. These could easily be doctored." "Then why," I said, "did you forge my signature on the authorizations?" The head of legal leaned forward. "Is that true?" Richard's jaw tightened. He looked at me with something almost like pity. "You've been under stress," he said. "These claims, they're delusional." I didn't flinch. I turned to the board's chair. A woman named Marjorie Crane, who'd built her empire on quiet ruthlessness. "Ma'am," I said, "I've already sent full copies of these to the SEC and to 3 independent journalists. If this board doesn't act now, the world will." You could feel the shift. Every face around that table changed, the precise moment when fear begins to outweigh loyalty. Richard laughed then, low and controlled. "You think you've won?" he said. You just nuked your own career. The company's reputation will crumble before anything hits me. You're the one who'll be blacklisted." He was right. That's how it always goes. The whistleblower burns while the suits rebuild their castles. But not this time. "Maybe," I said, "but this time, the castle's already on fire." And right then, Marjorie's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face paled. The headline was out. Neuralon CFO under investigation. Internal documents suggest $78 million diversion. There it was. The name. His name. The boardroom exploded, phones ringing, voices overlapping, panic replacing the polished calm. Richard turned to me, eyes dark with something between hate and disbelief. "You did this," he whispered. "No," I said, "you did." Security came minutes later. Not for me. For him. As they walked him out, cameras flashing from the lobby below, I caught one last look. That perfect confidence cracked down the middle. But victory didn't feel like victory. It felt empty. The office was chaos for days. Half the executives resigned, the other half tried to rewrite history. HR sent out wellness check emails that read more like surveillance reports. And me? I was labeled on leave pending internal clarification. No congratulations, no apology. Just silence, again. 2 nights later, I sat alone in my apartment. Lights off, laptop open. The city outside was still awake, taxis, sirens, laughter from rooftop bars. Life moved on, like it always does. Ellen called. They suspended him. SEC's opening a full audit. But Neuralon's law team is already spinning a rogue accountant story. I almost laughed. Of course they are. You've got options, she said. Go public with your name. Own the story. Or disappear before they bury you under legal nonsense. I didn't answer. Because behind the relief, behind the exhaustion, was something colder. The realization that the truth didn't fix everything. It just stripped the lies away. The next morning, I went back to the office to clean out my desk. No one looked at me. No one spoke. But as I reached for the photo frame I'd kept for years, my parents on graduation day. My smile wide, full of hope, I found something beneath it. A note. Folded once. No signature. It read, "They'll replace him. Be ready." I stared at it for a long time. Because whoever wrote that, they weren't wrong. In companies like Neuralon, power doesn't die, it just changes names. When I stepped into the elevator, the doors began to close. But before they did, that same young assistant, the one who'd nodded at me days ago, rushed forward. "Ms. Carter," he said, out of breath, "I just wanted to say, thank you. You did the right thing." I smiled faintly. "Keep your eyes open," I told him. "The truth's only safe if someone's watching." The doors shut. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not triumph, not relief. Just alignment. The truth was finally louder than the lies. Even if it came at a cost. That night, I turned on the TV, every channel running the same footage. Richard Lane in handcuffs, escorted through a crowd of flashing cameras, shouting reporters, and a single question echoing through it all. "Did you embezzle the funds, Mr. Lane?" He said nothing. Just kept walking. And I knew then, silence wasn't hiding the crime anymore. It was confessing it. After Richard's arrest, Neuralon froze, like a city after an earthquake. Everyone was still standing, but nothing was where it used to be. They called it a time of restructuring. What it really meant was confusion, layoffs, and long nights filled with whispers. People who once strutted around with certainty now walked like ghosts, afraid to be seen, afraid to speak. And in the middle of all that quiet panic, was me. Officially, I was still on administrative leave. Unofficially, I was radioactive. No one wanted to email me. No one wanted to be caught having lunch with me. Even the ones who'd once praised my precision and loyalty now avoided my eyes in the hallway. That's the price of telling the truth in places built on lies. I spent those first few weeks cleaning my apartment, drawers, closets, even the fridge, like I could scrub the memory off me. I couldn't. Everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of the person I used to be. The color-coded notebooks, the framed Employee of the Month certificate, the old coffee mug with the Neuralon logo. Each one felt like a relic from a life that didn't belong to me anymore. Some nights I'd wake up at 2 a.m., wondering if I made a mistake. If I should have kept quiet, kept my job, my stability, my so-called respectability. But then I'd remember Richard's face the moment the truth came out, and how silence had protected men like him for decades. No, I didn't make a mistake. I just didn't realize how lonely being right could feel. A month later, I got a call from Ellen again. They're rebuilding, she said. New leadership, some of the old boards gone. They're trying to clean up the mess. I sighed. Let me guess, they want to hire a PR team to look diverse and accountable. Worse, she said, they want you back, as a consultant. I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that sounds like disbelief mixed with exhaustion. They think I'd go back there? They think you're the only one who knows how to untangle what he built. Ellen said, they're offering full creative control. 6-month contract, double your old salary. It was tempting, not for the money, but for the irony. I told her I'd think about it. But I already knew my answer. The next morning, I walked through the park near my apartment. The air smelled like rain and something new, maybe freedom, maybe fear. I stopped by a small coffee shop I'd never noticed before. There was a flyer pinned near the register. Financial literacy workshops for women of color, free. Something about it made me pause. I asked the barista, who runs this? She smiled. Local nonprofit. They help single mothers, recent grads, anyone trying to rebuild. I took a flyer. And as I walked home, the thought that had been quietly circling my mind finally landed. Maybe I couldn't rebuild Neuralon. But I could rebuild something else. Within weeks, I started hosting small online workshops, money truths. I called them. At first, it was just 5 women. Then 10. Then 50. We met every Wednesday night over Zoom. We didn't just talk about accounting, we talked about power. About not being afraid to look at the numbers. Or to question them. Because money, like truth, leaves a trail, you just have to learn how to read it. One night, a woman named Tara spoke up. I almost got fired, she said, for asking why the men in my department get bonuses I don't. My manager told me to stop being emotional. Her voice cracked. And suddenly, I saw myself in her. I told her, they'll call you emotional until you stop letting them write your story. That night, our little group stayed online for 3 hours straight. Laughing, crying, learning. It didn't feel like a class anymore. It felt like healing. Months passed. News outlets stopped mentioning Neuralon. The scandal became a headline buried under newer scandals. That's how the world works. Outrage burns fast. And then it moves on. But for me, it was the beginning of something quieter. Steadier. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a single sheet of paper. It read, because of your workshop, I confronted my supervisor. I didn't lose my job. He did. I smiled, not because she won, but because she found her voice. For the first time in years, I felt useful again. Not as a number cruncher. Not as a whistleblower, but as a woman who'd turned pain into purpose. Then, one day, a journalist called. She said she was writing a follow-up piece on the Neuralon case, focusing on the women behind the truth. Would you be open to an interview? She asked. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay invisible. But another part, the part that still remembered that night in the boardroom, knew silence had already cost me enough. So I said yes. We met at a cafe downtown. She was young, sharp, with a notebook full of questions. But instead of asking about Richard or the company, she asked about me. What kept you from giving up? She said. I thought for a moment. Then I said, because someone once told me, they can take your job, but never your purpose. Her pen stopped moving. She looked up, eyes shining. "Who told you that?" "My mother," I said. And she was right. The article came out 2 weeks later. The headline read, "From Whistleblower to Waymaker: How One Woman Rebuilt Her Life After Speaking Truth to Power." It went viral. Not like the scandal. Not with outrage, but with respect. Messages poured in. Women from every corner of the country, accountants, teachers, nurses, engineers, all saying the same thing. "Thank you." I thought I was alone. And for the first time, I realized what I had built was bigger than revenge. It was community. One evening, I received an invitation in my inbox, an event hosted by Black women in finance, honoring women who had redefined integrity in corporate spaces. They wanted me to speak. I almost declined. Public speaking wasn't my thing. But then I remembered Tara, and all those women who stayed on Zoom with me, and all the nights I thought my voice didn't matter. So I went. Standing on that stage, looking out at rows of faces that mirrored my own, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: belonging. I told them, truth doesn't always make you popular. Sometimes it makes you unemployed, isolated, misunderstood, but if you hold onto it long enough, it becomes freedom. The crowd rose to their feet. And I thought, maybe this is what healing looks like. Later that night, as I walked to my car, someone called my name. It was the young assistant from Neuralon, the same one who had thanked me in the elevator. He looked older now, steadier. "I work for a new startup," he said. "We're building ethical AI for auditing. We could use someone like you." I smiled. "Be careful what you wish for," I said. "I ask too many questions." He laughed. "That's exactly why." We exchanged numbers. And as I drove home, city lights blurring past the windshield, I felt a quiet certainty. Maybe this wasn't a comeback. Maybe it was a beginning. When I got home, I found another envelope waiting at my door, from Neuralon. Inside was a formal letter. They were officially clearing my record, apologizing for unwarranted disciplinary action. They even offered a settlement for emotional distress. I folded it neatly and set it aside. No anger, no gloating, just closure. Because I didn't need their money or their validation. I already had something better: peace. And that, I realized, was the truest kind of revenge. The morning of the hearing arrived like the calm before a storm, still, heavy, and full of the kind of silence that makes your heart beat too loud. I'd been awake for 36 hours straight, not out of fear, but focus, the kind of focus that burns everything else away. The night before, I'd printed every document, every transfer sheet, every memo Richard had signed, each page a confession in ink. When I walked into that marble lobby, people turned to look. It wasn't admiration. It was the kind of look you get when they're not sure if you're the villain, or the one who's about to burn the villains down. Inside, the conference room was already set. Long table, 12 board members, a few reporters in the back, whispering, waiting. And at the end of the table, Richard. Perfectly composed, expensive suit, the same charming grin that once fooled an entire company. He didn't even look nervous. He didn't have to. Because people like him always believed money could rewrite the story before the truth caught up. But not this time. The chairman opened with formalities. "Ms. Carter, you've requested this internal hearing. You claim to have evidence of fraud against our chief financial officer. Please proceed." I stood. Hands steady. Voice low. "I don't claim," I said, "I prove." And I slid the folder forward. Every eye in that room followed the papers as they spread across the table like dominoes. Transaction logs, forged vendor contracts, offshore statements, encrypted messages. Each piece aligned perfectly, too perfectly to be coincidence. Richard leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "These are baseless accusations. My department has already cleared all these transactions." I looked straight at him. "Your department is you." A ripple of murmurs. I kept going. "AI Future Holdings," I said, "was established 5 months before you joined Neuralon. Registered in the Cayman Islands. Its listed directors? 2 shell identities tied to your previous employer. And here's the best part. Every consulting payment routed through that entity ends up in a trust under your sister's name. The silence hit like thunder after lightning. He tried to interrupt. This is absurd. But the chairman raised his hand. Let her finish. So I did. I projected the last file onto the screen. A memo. Dated 6 weeks ago. Signed by Richard. Approving a $3.2 million AI infrastructure project that never existed. And then I clicked one more time. An audio file. His voice. Caught in a late-night call with a vendor. If Denise asks questions, we'll move the funds through the backup route. She won't find it until it's too late. The room froze. Every whisper died. He went pale. For the first time, Richard's confidence cracked. The chairman's tone shifted. Mr. Lane, do you deny this recording? He didn't answer. Security entered quietly, standing by the door. And me? I just watched. Not with satisfaction. Not with vengeance. But with the kind of peace that only comes when the truth stops hiding. When they escorted him out, his eyes met mine. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Because the truth is, he built his entire empire on deception. And when you build on lies, even glass towers eventually collapse. After the hearing, the board suspended operations for 2 weeks. The CEO resigned the next day. News spread fast. Neuralon scandal. CFO arrested for multi-million fraud. I didn't say a word to the press. I didn't have to. The story spoke for itself. When I finally walked out of that building, the same one I'd entered every morning for 7 years, it didn't feel like leaving. It felt like reclaiming. The sky outside was turning gold, the kind of sunrise that feels like forgiveness. People messaged me that night, old colleagues, strangers online. Some said I was brave. Others called me foolish. But courage and foolishness? Sometimes, they're just the same acts seen from different sides of history. And for the first time in a long time, I slept. No spreadsheets. No whispers. Just silence, the good kind this time. I learned something that day. Truth doesn't need an audience. It just needs someone willing to speak it when everyone else stays quiet. When I stepped out of Neuralon Systems that morning, the air felt lighter, almost as if the city itself was exhaling with me. For 7 years, I had walked the same corridors, staring at fluorescent lights, tallying numbers, and measuring my worth in spreadsheets. But that life, the one where truth was optional and betrayal lurked in every email, was over. I was free, and for the first time, I felt the full weight and wonder of freedom. I didn't rush anywhere. I walked slowly, letting the sunlight kiss my face, noticing the rhythm of life that I had long ignored. The hum of traffic, the laughter of strangers on the sidewalk, even the wind rustling the leaves. It all reminded me that the world keeps moving. No matter what kind of storm brews inside offices or boardrooms. And I realized, as I sipped my coffee and let the warmth seep in, that the storm I had weathered wasn't just about exposure or revenge. It was about truth, living true, and the moment I embraced that, I felt a clarity I had never known. My mother's words came back to me, clear as a bell. They can take your job, but never your purpose. That night, when I had cried in my kitchen, it had sounded like just words. But now, walking in the golden morning light, it felt like a map, a guide for how to live, how to move, and how to empower myself and others. The next few weeks were strange. Friends and former colleagues reached out. Some were supportive, some hesitant, some wanted advice, others wanted to apologize. But I learned quickly that my path forward wasn't about reconciling with the past. It was about building the future I believed in. I started small, a workshop for women accountants, a mentoring session for young professionals curious about corporate finance. I shared not just numbers, but lessons about intuition, observation, and courage, about how a single person, armed with patience and evidence, can challenge deceit, about how workplace betrayal doesn't define your worth, about how living true can become a silent revolution in itself. It was during one of these sessions that I saw the first real fruits of my journey. A young woman named Tara approached me afterward. She was nervous, trembling with the weight of her own office struggles. I confronted my manager today," she whispered. I didn't get fired." He listened. Her eyes sparkled, a mix of fear, relief, and newfound confidence. And in that moment, I realized something I had only felt abstractly before. My fight, my resilience, and my voice weren't just for me. They were a bridge for others who didn't yet believe they had one. I began documenting everything, not for fame, not for recognition, but to ensure that anyone, anywhere, who felt silenced could see that truth, courage, and integrity mattered, that even in corporate halls where whispers and deceit often rule, a steadfast heart can shift outcomes. Even in my personal life, the transformation was profound. I stopped measuring relationships by utility and started measuring them by trust. I noticed things I had overlooked: my sister's laugh over the phone, the way my neighborhood cafe remembered my usual order, the little daily kindnesses that build a life worth living. And yes, there were days when shadows of doubt returned, moments when I thought about the CFO, the betrayal, the near misses, but each time, I reminded myself, the value of my life is not in revenge, it's in truth. In doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. I started writing, not a memoir, not a public statement, but reflections on corporate culture, integrity, and personal power. My words resonated with women and men alike. Messages about standing up, being seen, and acting with courage. I received emails and comments daily, some sharing their own experiences of injustice, others seeking guidance. Every note, every story, strengthened my resolve. I was meant to be a conduit for truth and empowerment. And then came the opportunity I hadn't expected. A group of women in finance asked me to host a seminar. A larger one this time, bringing in hundreds of participants from across the country. I agreed. The seminar was called Living True: Lessons in Courage and Integrity. The room was packed, the energy electric, and when I spoke, I felt the power of shared experience ripple through the audience. Their nods, their murmurs, their questions, they reminded me that storytelling is a force, that sharing our journeys amplifies the lessons we've learned. It was during that seminar that I finally fully understood the arc of my own story. Workplace revenge, the headlines, the scandal, the downfall of the CFO, wasn't the climax. The true triumph was something quieter, more profound: the ability to live authentically, to teach others, and to see courage ignite in people who once felt powerless. I wanted every woman, every professional, every person watching this video to know something. You're capable of more than you think. Your voice has weight, your actions matter, and even when the world is unjust, there is power in staying true to yourself. So here's the challenge I offer you today. Take a moment. Reflect on your own life, your own workplace, your own moments of doubt. Ask yourself, are you living true? Are you acting with integrity? Even when it's hard, even when no one else will notice? Because the answer matters. It matters to your career, your relationships, and most importantly, to yourself. If you've resonated with Denise's story, if it has reminded you of your own courage or inspired you to act with integrity, here's what I want you to do. Subscribe to this channel and join a community of truth tellers and courageous professionals. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. And comment below one action you'll take this week to live true, whether at work, at home, or in your personal life. Because this isn't just Denise's story. It's yours, too. And together, we can create a world where honesty, integrity, and courage aren't rare, they're the standard.